that pretty much drowns out my attempt at an introduction. Welcome to Between the Lines with one of the most talented multi-percussionists in the world today, Pete Lockett. He plays like some 6 million percussion instruments and has played in diverse locations ranging from Belfast to Bangalore and with musicians ranging from Peter Gabriel to A.R. Rahman. In fact, he's here, apart from shows and concerts, he's here to record for the film Shivaji. What's that experience like?
Yeah, it's amazing, Anu. Really fantastic. I mean, it's great. I've done quite a few things with A.R. Rahman anyway. I did Bandi Matram and some other things with him.
What do you think of the Indian movie industry? I know you've worked in Hollywood, you've done all the James Bond films, but what's this one like?
No, it's great. It's really great. I mean, his studio is just top. You know, it's one of the top studios you can find. You know, the level of the top studio you find anywhere in the world, really. It's an excellent studio. And, you know, it's great to be involved in that.
You play so many instruments, Pete. Do you believe that, how is that possible? Do you believe that if you master one, you can play them all?
No. I mean, by learning an instrument, you learn how to play music, and you learn certain things, certain formalities, certain ways of practicing. But if you learn one instrument, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can then go on and immediately play another instrument. So, for example, as an example, you know, I played tabla, and then I got interested in South Indian music, so I went on to play the mridangam. But then I had to start from square one with the mridangam, tat, ti, tum, nam, and onwards and upwards. And you could make a sound on the mridangam, but you weren't really playing the instrument without the actual formal study of that particular instrument.
So can we have a little demonstration now? That would be really interesting.
Absolutely. So the technique in Cuba involves using the thumb of the left hand and the fingertips of the left hand, if you're left-handed, on the high drum. So by putting the thumb down, you mute the sound. There's the open sound. The sound with the thumb is closed, and the sound with the fingers is half closed. And this is how a lot of the rhythm varieties are created. This rhythm is actually called the hammer. It's in Spanish is martillo. It's called the martillo rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So that's the Latin American bongos. Which is made by a drum company called Remo Drums, and you can see it's an artificial skin, unlike the lizard skin, and still has the single jingle. Really, if you don't know the kanjira, how to play the kanjira, then I suggest you should pop down to your local kanjira player and have some lessons, because it's a truly fantastic drum, and you can take it everywhere with you and play. And all the strokes are played with the 3-fingered unit and the 1-fingered unit, whilst the left hand is bending the pitch of the drum.
So what is it? Is it intuition then, that if you, I mean, you're so versatile as we just saw, but is it also to do with intuition?
I think that you've either got music in your blood and in your body, you know, or you haven't. I think everybody's got something, whether it's some sort of art or some sort of creative ability. Some people, I honestly think, are naturally talented with music, and some people, you know, it's just like a scale. Some people are really genius, and some people are really terrible, but the majority of people are in the middle. And so depending on the amount of work that you put in as a musician and as a person, then you can develop to you know, different levels.
But isn't it really bizarre that you discovered that you were interested in drums at the age of 19, which is pretty old, really?
It is, yeah. I was lucky.
Tell us how that happened. You walked past a drum store. And
exactly. I was just walking past a drum shop and I saw a big sign in the window, you know, drum lessons. So I thought, that's a good idea. And I went in, and 2 weeks later I was in a band. It was a punk band. That was the start of it, really.
The percussion itself, from being a fringe instrument, it's regarded as an ensemble in its own right, but that's taken quite a lot of time for people to change that perception, and that's what we're going to talk about with Pete Lockett after a short break. You're watching Between the Lines. Don't go away. Welcome back to Between the Lines. We're in conversation with one of the world's most versatile multi-percussionists, Pete Lockett. Pete, we were talking about how percussion, being a fringe instrument, has now come into center stage and it's regarded as something in its own right. So what were the initial years like when you started playing?
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, I mean, in the West, you know, the drums sort of came to the front of the stage in the 40s and 50s, really, with people like Louis Bellson and Buddy Rich, and some of the great big band drummers were the first people to, you know, come to the front of the stage and make drums an instrument, a solo instrument in their own right. So in the West it was, you know, slightly different in terms of that setting. So that was quite established. But
world over we're talking about now?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, in India, you know, the solo tradition is quite rich and deep. You know, the idea of percussion solo, the Tani Arbatram, for example, in South India, and so the instruments as a solo instrument, you know, is more and more profiled as a sort of individual solo and respected instrument in its own right.
Now, you're very good at the Indian Tala system, but when you look at the classical idiom, both the Hindustani, Carnatic and Western, it's just worlds apart and worlds different. Or I might be wrong. Maybe there are lots of similarities.
I think it's like anything. It's if you get to the music itself, really, effectively you're making music, and as an individual, regardless of, you know, where you come from or skin color or what your musical training is or whatever, you know, we're getting to music. And more nowadays we're seeing with a lot of open-minded and creative players, we're seeing a whole new area of music developing. And it's interesting to see how different people are approaching it. So, for example, I've been in Calcutta working with Bikram Ghosh. You know, I've been in Chennai working with Viku Vinayakram sir and Rajesh Mandolin and you know, lots of different people. And it's interesting to see that in actual fact, when they're going towards a fusion type setting, they're actually ending up with a similar sort of end result. So really, it's the sort of universal voice of music that is.
So you have to be really in sync with each other in a very deep way.
Well, I think it's that on the sort of you know, the personal and sort of philosophical level, if you like. But it's also, if you've learnt one another's music, I mean, you can't just sort of say, put a tabla player and a mridangam player and a jazz guitarist and a Western classical violin player together and expect them to make music. The only way it's going to happen is if they understand each other's music and have studied it to a certain extent.
So do you mean to say that if you're really good at your art and craft, that's the beginning, and then if you have an open mind, you can adapt to any musical situation?
To a certain extent, you have to study the music. You know, I mean, I couldn't come here and suddenly just sit and play with master Indian drummers. You know, you could, certain things, but, you know, there are certain formalities in Indian percussion, there are certain formalities in Western percussion, and it's the knowledge that both parties have of each other's things. That's how it can work.
Is the Indian Tala system very complex? What were your...
Well, I mean, the Indian system is way the most advanced rhythmic system
very
in the world.
Very intricate, yeah.
It's amazing, yeah. I mean, there's nothing to touch it in terms of sophistication and developed, you know. It's amazing.
So
totally
let's look at a little jugalbandi between you and Mahesh Vinayakram. That's what we're going to bring you right now.
Gamani da ni bada ni sa. Sa ni da baga bada ni da ni da baga bada ni da ta ni da baga bada ni da baga. Ma ga re ga ma ba ma. Karara didena tanadirna.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that it's great to work with Mahesh Vinayakram. He's a great vocalist. He's very creative and open-minded. Like we were in the studio yesterday and we were doing a one piece, and he sang this piece beginning to end. I wanted it to be a traditional piece that I'm going to put electronics on and make into a longer piece and change around. And he's great. He's got the open mind to accept that and just sort of think, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Mahesh hails from a very illustrious family of musicians. We're going to continue our conversation with the great Pete Lockett in a couple of minutes. You're watching Between the Lines. Welcome back to Between the Lines. You just saw two giants performing together, Mahesh Vinayakram and Pete Lockett. Mahesh would like to say a few words about you and how it's been working with you, the collaboration.
The best thing about Pete is that நம்ம இதை சொல்ல போனோம்னா நம்மளோட இந்தியன் பர்கஷனோட சிக்னிஃபிகன்ஸை நியூயன்சஸை கரெக்டாக புரிஞ்சுண்டு அதுக்கேற்ற மாதிரி அவரோட கொன்னக்கோல் லெசனை அவரோட ட்ரம்ஸ்ல அப்ளை பண்றது வந்து இட்ஸ் a real fabulous thing that I've ever seen because I've fused with many artists but Pete especially is so special or unique that he's able to play the Indian nuances like கொன்னக்கோல்ல என்ன சொல்றோமோ அதையே வந்து ரொம்ப few people like Steve Smith are very 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 few people who does that. So that is the unique thing about Pete Lockett which I really admire and that fascinates me.
So how long have you been working with Indian musicians? When did you first come to India?
Actually, it was quite a long time before I did go to India. Most of my studies were in England. I studied tabla with someone called Yusuf Ali Khan and Mridingam with a gentleman called Mr. Karakudi Krishnamurti, who's a really fantastically generous and giving person to me, which was ever appreciated. But it was only about 4 or 5 years ago that I came to India and I did a tour. Luckily enough to do a tour with Selva Ganesh and a project that I brought from England. So that was really exciting. And now, it can't keep me away.
What have you learned from Indian musicians? I don't mean in the conventional manner when I say what have they taught you. I mean in a more general sense.
Well, I think music in India generally is that, it's more part of people's lives here. It's more part of their whole being. Whereas, in the West, art is sort of, in a sense, is sort of sectioned off. It's become a sort of an addition to your life, to people's lives. Music is a separate thing. It's not necessarily part of life in general and life as people live it. But here, everyone's got instruments in their homes. People play. The postman will probably be quite a good kanjira player or something.
You never know.
So it's just more ingrained in the society, which I think is an eminently positive and egoless thing.
Oh yes. Coming to technological advancement, you find that there's a lot of electric percussion as well. Are you for it, or do you still like?
Yeah, I mean, it's another instrument for me. I think for me, it's about having an open mind with lots of different musical cultures and sounds, and it's another sound, whether it's electronic or whatever. It's a sound that is emitted by striking. So as long as it's used tastefully, and one of the dangers of electronics is people can just go like that. And the sound of 15,000 musicians comes out by holding one note down on the keyboard, and it's a lack of training, it's a lack of
kills creativity.
A lack of creativity, a lack of vision, and a lack of talent. So if you can employ it within your area of expertise or whatever you want to call it with a musician, then then that's got to be a positive thing.
Now, from jamming and from improvisation, what does it feel like to play in a Philharmonic Orchestra? You've played with a lot of those. Does it involve a different discipline?
Yeah, I mean, I very rarely work specifically with orchestras. When I do work with orchestras, it's in a band situation. So, for example, I toured with Craig Armstrong, who's a film composer. He did Moulin Rouge, and he's working with A.R. Rahman at the moment on a film in England. We did that band with an orchestra. So, I mean, I'm not an orchestral percussion in as much as I don't work with orchestras. If I work with orchestras, usually they're pre-recorded on a film or
You don't feel
like
that it's restrictive?
I mean, I'm not an orchestral player. I mean, for me, playing orchestral music, playing written music, you know, it's a craft. It's not necessarily an art, you know. I think it's all well and good, and it's beautiful, and obviously people's individual interpretations mean something. But for me, I'm more interested in pure art, pure creativity, rather than just playing something that someone's written and you reinterpret it. That's craftsmanship to me, rather than artistry.
Well, Pete Lockett in conversation with us on Between the Lines. We're going to take a short break, and he's going to come back and tell us all about his concerts, his working in movies, and his love for India. Hi, you're watching Between the Lines with one of the world's greatest multi-percussionists, Pete Lockett, who's here for concerts and for also a movie recording of Rajnikant's latest film, Shivaji. He's been having a great time. He loves India. He's going to tell us about his website on which you offer free lessons.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, for me, it was learning a lot of the instruments, some of the obscure instruments that I've sort of learned. It was difficult to get information. You have to try and source it out and find somebody. But, you know, for me, it made me feel very strongly that, you know, later on in my career, I wanted to make that information available. And now, you know, with the internet, I've done that by sort of having lots of free lessons on my website, you know, video and MP3, and it's just totally free for people to go and download stuff, and there's no registration or anything. It's just a completely free.
Do you have somebody
resource.
Sort of monitoring it to see how many people actually access it?
You can access the stats and stuff like that, yeah, but I don't really have the time to get into all that, you know.
But of course, somebody gives you feedback about what's happening, yeah?
Yeah, I'll get so many emails from different, and you know, places like I'll get one from someone in Hawaii saying, well, you know, there's no way I could learn the basics of tabla, for example, or kanjira, or you know, different drums, and it's great that resource is there, and thank you.
So how long does it take to make a really good drummer?
To make a really good drummer?
Or a percussionist?
Yeah, well, it's a lifelong thing. I'm still trying to become one. It's, you know, it's continual. It's, you know, but you know, you've got to look at the objectives of being a drummer or a percussionist, and really, you know, it's having good time, creating a good rhythm for people to play to. You know, you can have all the technique in the world. If you can't make a good groove, then you might as well have a mobile phone without a battery, you know, or a DVD without a DVD player. What
was the Beat This like, that the BBC concert that you did where thousands of drummers across the UK played to the same rhythm?
Yeah, it was a world record, actually, of the most drummers simultaneously playing.
And they were in different parts?
Yeah, all over, right from the very furthest tip, from the furthest island in this, you know, way off the south coast of England, to the furthest island, the furthest off the north coast of Scotland. And they're all synced by a click coming from London. And they're all playing the same thing at the same time, in sync with each other, and the cameras were going between the different places. It was 30 minutes long.
Wow. How do you manage to pack in all this? You do movie music, your concerts, your albums, your tours, and everything. You've been called the most hard-working musician. Is it hard work and a little bit of luck as well?
Oh, you've got to have luck as a musician, you know. I mean, if the chances don't come, then it doesn't matter how good you are, you know, or what you do. You're not going to be able to. You need a platform, you know. You need to, you know.
So where did you think your lucky break came from? What was the defining moment, as it were?
It's difficult to say, but because, you know, I've broken into so many different areas. And for me, it's not even about whether I do or don't break into areas. It's about doing it. You know, the lucky thing for me is that I play music and I enjoy it, and I'm continually developing, and I continually feel like a child with it. And so that's the luck for me. That's the joy of still enjoying, like, how much I enjoyed when I started playing. But the first time I played the drum set, and to enjoy it that much, still, that's my luck.
You think your dragons are your lucky charm?
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Let's hear you play one of your grand finale piece for us.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me down.
Bravo, thank you. Thanks so much for joining us, Pete, on the program.
It's a great pleasure. Hope to see you again.
Well, what can I say? Pete has me completely bowled over, not just with his artistry, but also his modesty, his graciousness, his patience and kindness. It's been a great honor having one of the world's greatest percussionists on the show, Between the Lines. That's all we have on this episode. Until we see you next week, take care and goodbye.
Dum